Hi guys, my name is Warren Papier. I'm an associate at KMH Architects and I'm joined with my colleague today.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Ray. I'm a partner at KMH Architects.
Today we're having a discussion on education and learning spaces in the architectural environment. So in what way can educational architecture foster environments for learners and educators alike?
I think it's a difficult question to answer verbally, but something that you can experience physically quite quickly when you are in a successful learning environment. And it comes down to a myriad of factors. I think fundamentally the size and proportion of spaces is very important to promote an environment that is inclusive, creative and flexible, and that will come down also to the materials that we use. We've found that certain materials can give a sense of not facilitating a learning, whereas others enable far more creativity. And we've started to find that material palette has been represented in a number of buildings that we've done in recent years. Then I think how flexible spaces are is really critical in today's learning environments, and design solutions that enable that are things like where can you plug in your devices? How adaptable is that? Can you have pull down power cables from the ceiling that allows you to move desks around on the floor wherever you need them? Tech solutions like mobile digital screens so that you can have non-hierarchical teaching spaces and you can rearrange furniture. Mobile furniture where you have wheels on tables and chairs and you can reconfigure spaces very easily. I think acoustics is really important. Increasingly, particularly in very flexible learning in spaces where there's no front of a classroom per se, you really need to think about a consistent acoustic environment so that wherever you are in a space, you can either hear your fellow learners if you're working collaboratively, or if there is a teacher, you can hear them regardless of where you are in that space.
So John, how is your participatory process realized? Are you engaging with multiple role players? Who's in the room? How does it work?
Thanks. So we actively work very hard to bring our end user group into a participatory design process. And the formulation of that end user group is very important. Through the D-School project, we were very privileged really to see design thinking in action, and that was a building that we designed through a co-creation process, and the D-School taught us as we went through that process how to bring people who aren't necessarily designers into a design space, and those processes and steps are what we are using now and we're finding to be quite successful with subsequent projects to bring end users into a collaborative design environment, and we take them through step by step a design thinking process to firstly define the brief in a detailed and nuanced way, to go through an ideation process together, and then we are using models, but very rudimentary models that are really scaffolding to allow the end users to build those prototypes with us, and we do that in a workshop process.
I think through some of the processes that I joined you on, I think it was really important to have those mundane objects, post-its, pieces of Lego, because it really breaks down the barriers for someone that doesn't have an architectural background, that doesn't know how to draw properly, doesn't know scale, doesn't know how to build a model. So those objects are more relatable, and in a sense then breaks the barriers between you as the professional and them as the user client. I think what was also important is that by involving them in the design process, there seems to be more of a ownership once the project is realized, and there's a sense of pride, and you see the building start lasting longer, and people take care of it more because of the fact that they're involved in that participatory process. So are there any emerging concepts within educational design that you feel is really sort of fundamental or pioneering in the way we move forward in designing these spaces?
We've certainly found that there's repeated components and aspects of design that we've incorporated into a number of recent projects. I think a trend certainly is active learning, which is, from an architectural point of view, really focusing on creating flexible spaces. Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge because increasingly spaces for education are becoming very specific. And that's, you'll see that in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. It's not one size fits all. So there's very specific needs for individual spaces, but in providing those individual needs, how can we create the most flexible and adaptive places as possible? So that's certainly a trend. I think sustainability and bringing sustainable design both into how the building is made, but also in terms of how it operates and runs on a daily basis, and how sustainable buildings can be part of the education process for the people that occupy them, is really important. And I think that links to ideas around bringing the natural environment into the building. And that's not necessarily bringing plants into the building, but it's ways of connecting the building to its surroundings, whether that's views out to connect to a key view like our mountain, or a distant view of the ocean, or even a nice tree that you can see through a framed view. It can be ideas around having a skylight so that you can see the sky. There's also really interesting technical, innovative solutions like at the D School we had a very sophisticated lighting system that used daylight sensors to tune the artificial lighting in relation to the amount of natural light that we brought into the building to positively reinforce people's circadian rhythms when they're inside the building. So, that's a really interesting idea as well about how you can start to bring nature into your design. And then I think linked to sustainable design and just generally the built environment is a focus on occupant health and well-being. And that's not just the learners themselves, but that's also the staff that are teaching. So that's, ideas around, for example, in the D School, where we have it's a 6-star green rated building, and we don't have a traditional air conditioning system. We're using a radiant cooling solution, which is a really comfortable environment to be in. And you're never too hot or too cold, and we have no recycled air. So all the air that's coming in is 100% fresh air, and that's been removed from the building. So I think particularly in the post-COVID world, those kind of design solutions are quite important. Warren, from within that discussion about emerging trends, I would assume that technology plays a big role.
Yeah, 100%. I think with regards to technology in the learning environment, we're seeing more and more of it. Learners from primary school already are engaging with tablets as a means of learning in lieu of textbooks. They're finding other digital means of teaching from the educator's perspective. There's things like smart boards. And so certainly it's like, how do we enable or create spaces that are conducive for those types of learning. So things like lighting does become or even more important in the sense that you need to have sufficient daylight to look at a screen, but also then in front of you, and then also look down and be able to comprehend. So also the change in schooling syllabuses, and if you're finding more diversity in subjects that are being offered, there's a lot more practical subjects that are making its way into the classroom. There's robotics and those type of things. So it's changing the space or allowing it to be flexible enough to accommodate those sort of activities that need to happen in the space. So definitely the focus on technology introducing itself into the classroom is a bit of a challenge that we need to deal with, and we're encountering that more and more as we're getting these jobs, these projects, and it's quite exciting because as we go along, we're actually learning about those things ourselves, because we have to put ourselves in the learner or the educator's shoes in order to understand how to shape the space to accommodate those functionalities.
So Warren, does KMH have a signature way of making buildings, or a design signature?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have a specific way of approaching a particular project, in the sense that we tackle each project on its own merit, in the sense that we try and understand the client's needs, the client's brief, and we approach it with our expertise that we've embodied over the years. So we really try and unpack that specific sort of challenge. I often say constraints equal opportunities, and each project presents itself differently. So there's no cookie cutter way of designing a building. So I think if you have a look at our repertoire over the 112 years, there's an element of uniqueness, there's an element of timelessness, and those are some of the things that we try and strive for. Certainly from my perspective, in the last few years, we've had really amazing buildings that we've designed, but we value them all the same. The service we offer our clients is pretty consistent across the board.
My parting thought is that as an architect and our architectural team that work in the education sector, it's incredibly fulfilling to be involved in projects that are meaningful, both to the people that ultimately use them, but I think to our society as a whole. And I'm not necessarily just talking about the high-end education projects that we've done in recent years, but we're currently involved in less privileged education projects as well, and those are, if anything, more important. And so I think that really is very rewarding, to be able to spend our time making buildings that have a positive impact and are hopefully really loved and appreciated by the people that ultimately end up occupying them.
Interrupt.
Your parting thought?
No.